Hey guys, good to see everybody tonight. Doing Bible study online as opposed to in person. We had Betty Ruth Bates' funeral today, and we actually did the funeral service, the burial service, and then we did a meal at the church for them. And so our staff, our folks were worn out, and so it's actually much easier for us to I'm messing up my recordings here on some of these people. So we did all that. We just didn't want to overtax our folks who would normally do dinner and all of those things at the church. So we're actually going to talk a little bit tonight about the end of a season and trying to, these seasons of life, because, Deborah and Rebecca lost their mom today. And she was almost 90 years old, but it's the end of a season. It's the end of a period in their life where they had their mom and dad, and then now they don't. And so life moves on, and it's a different season. And Jill and I are in that season as well. As many of you all know, my daughter has now moved into Belmont, and so she's in a dorm. And so Jill and I are empty nesters, and I am broadcasting from our home in Franklin, which we have for one more day, and then we're moving to Culleoka. And we've been staying in Culleoka, and that's been fantastic so far. We're living like hoarders. You can come over and walk through the path and tunnel of boxes that are there. As you can see behind me, there's basically a ladder and a lamp with no shade on it, and we're just basically cleaning so we can get our security deposit back and all that kind of thing. But these end of seasons, just imagine with me for a minute. What do you think the children of Israel felt like when Moses died? What was that next day? The end of an era of who that guy was and all that he did, all that God did through him. What was life going to be like from that point on? It had to be a scary moment, didn't it? And I know for Deborah and for Rebecca both that they were both rejoicing and celebrating. I mean, there were lots of tears at the funeral, but they were rejoicing because their mom had been in poor health and in a nursing home, in a memory care type facility. And then she passed away, and she is in so much of a better place. It's unbelievable. She's in heaven with Jesus. And so we sit in those moments and we go, wow, that's incredible for her. And at the same time, we move on into a new season, into a new era. Can you imagine what it was like for the children of Israel when Joshua passed away? Because when Moses died, they did at least have Joshua and Caleb. And so those guys had been there with them. They were the adults that didn't die off in the wilderness like everybody else, all the parents did. And so they at least had Joshua. But when they went in and they did battle in the promised land. They assigned who got to go where, which of the 12 tribes got to go where, and they saw great victories and great miracles. I mean, the sun stood still, it went backwards. I mean, all of these different amazing things that they saw go on. They defeated so many giants in taking over the promised land, and they just saw these great things, and it was really a wonderful time and a very successful time of walking with God. They saw the walls of Jericho fall down because of the power of God. But then when Joshua died, what do you think that next day was like? It was the end of an era. It was a whole new season that was starting. And so for us, we would go, man, that had to be scary. It had to be, the uncertainty and doing something new. And Jill and I have picked up and done different things, just completely trusting God, stepping out in faith. And, He has always provided, but it doesn't always have to be that kind of step of faith. Just think of, I talked about Ruth today because the name Ruth is so prevalent in Miss Betty Ruth's family. It's Deborah's middle name. And so, but Ruth, was living in Moab. That was a country like Mexico or Canada or and she was there, and she met Naomi's son, one of them, and Orpah met another one, and they got married. And the only reason Naomi and her husband, Elimelech, I think that was his name, were living in Moab was because there was a famine in the land, in Bethlehem, and where they were living before in Israel. And so they went to this foreign land to get food. And during that time, Naomi's husband died. Then the two, Ruth's husband died, Orpah's husband died. And so it's those three women. And Naomi is sitting there and she goes, it's time to move. I've heard that there's food back in our homeland. And so it's the end of an era. Naomi has been there with her whole family, and she had these two daughter-in-laws whom they seem to love her. They're devoted to her. And in fact, she has to go and say to them, go back. You don't have to stay with me and be spinsters or widows. You can go find another husband. You're still young. And Orpah agrees. But she's bawling, she's crying, and it's the new season for her. But she goes back home, and Naomi and Ruth leave, and they go back and for Ruth, it's a whole new place. She's never been there. It's a foreign land for her now. She's leaving her homeland, her people, her own family, and she's had all of this trial. Her husband died. She watched her brother-in-law die, her father-in-law die. And it's been a rough season. There was famine. And now she's moving, and she doesn't know what that means. She doesn't know what tomorrow holds. She just knows that together with Naomi, that life's worth living, that she's devoted because she knows that Naomi needs her. She knows, and Naomi knows that, Ruth needs her. They're family. And today we were at the repast meal, the wake at the church, and Myrtle came over to me. I had my hands in dishwater. She came over. She was washing dishes, wiping off tables, doing all this, Myrtle Brooks. And she goes, man, I don't know how people do it without a church family. She goes, in times like this, she said, I love my church family. I don't know what I would do without them. And Hebrews 10:25, Paul writes, don't give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing. But, he says, and I'm summarizing now, but just, stay together, encourage one another as long as it's today. Build one another up, support one another. And, that's Ruth and Naomi. Going back, it's almost, we like to sit there and talk about, Thelma and Louise and those kind of movies and, these sisterhood. And these two ladies, it was so much more than Thelma and Louise. These two ladies, if there's during their time, if there's no man around, they have no rights. They can't do business. They have no money. They're poor, and they're going to go back. And Naomi does have some family, it seems, but nothing that she can lean on for any kind of strength or support. And so they go back. And so when they get there, Ruth, without being asked, says, "I'm going to go glean in the fields," which was a humble act. It just means you're committed to doing whatever's necessary. And, in a family, moms and dads do that. Good moms and dads do. I think that's deteriorated over the years. But for the most part, my dad, my stepdad, he did whatever for me. He did whatever he could for his family. He worked a job, and oftentimes a job that he didn't like, and actually got up every day early in the morning, came home late, then did all the yard work, did all the cars, washing cars and fixing stuff up around the house, and helped with everything. Took us camping and on vacations. He just did whatever it took. And I can remember when I dislocated my knee that he came, and I was at my friend Scott's house, and my knee was an L. My leg was an L at the knee. My foot went out this way. It was just like this. And my dad, I'm laying on the pavement, writhing around, and these kids, these 8th grade boys are all around me because nobody's parents were home, and they're just like, we don't know what to do. We don't know what to do. My dad said, you got a piece of plywood? And they went rummaging around in the garage and got a piece of plywood, and they put me on it, and then put me in the back of his Jeep Cherokee. They just, took the board and pulled it into the car and drove me fast as he could to the hospital. But he left work. He did whatever it took because he knew I was injured, and was willing to do that. He didn't say, I'm busy. I got too much work. Work's too important today. I got too much going on. My mom, put herself between me and my real dad, who was such a violent, angry man, and just shielded me all the time from all kinds of stuff. I've told you the story, and it's one of the absolute worst. And you can understand. You don't have to think, anything bad about my dad in this sense, because a lot of us would react in the same way. But I can remember him. My grandfather owned a gas station, and my dad was there polishing and washing his 442, and it was spotless and had a big engine in it, and you crank it up, and it made great throaty noise. But he had it there, and he was fixing it up, and my mom and I were just hanging around, probably drinking a Coke and just with him. And for some reason, the toolbox was laying there. He had been doing some stuff fixing under the hood or underneath, and I mean, I'm a little guy, like 3-4 years old maybe at the most, and I take a screwdriver out of the toolbox, and for some reason chuck it like a lawn dart up in the air, threw it straight up and real high, and it came straight down into the back windshield of my dad's car and shattered it. I mean, shattered it. And you have never seen a woman move like a gazelle, but my mother picked me up and ran with me because my dad was right behind her, ready to choke me out, right? I mean, he was just ready to kill me. And for him, nothing meant more to him than that car. That car, absolutely. Other than making people laugh, that was the most important thing to my dad. And so she put her life in harm's way and lots of times. Worked jobs, came home, cooked, cleaned, did laundry, all the things that worked in the yard, helped me with homework, bathed me, clothed me, all those things. And, that's commitment. That's what Ruth was doing. And this is her mother-in-law. It's not even a blood relative. And she was willing to go out and to say to everybody in that community, this is how poor we are. I'm going to have to go out here and do this. And I loved it because today we talked about Miss Betty Ruth and that she sang all the time. She had this joy of the Lord in her heart that she sang wherever she went, and sang in church all the time, did specials, sang in the choir, sang with her husband, all these wonderful things. And for us, getting that joy in our lives, to be able to sing in those moments, that Ruth is out there. Boaz takes notice, along with the overseers, along with the other people who are working, the harvesters, the men, the women. They all notice her. And the reason isn't because she looked like some, supermodel. It's because she was working hard out in the heat. She's sweaty, she's dirty, all these kind of things. But her attitude, they could see Jesus in her. They could see God in her and her attitude. And I can just imagine that she's humming. And today at the funeral, we were talking about when we all get to heaven, and we talked about Amazing Grace. Those were two of Miss Betty's favorite songs. There were lots of them that she loved. But I just happened to mention that, I was reading some of the lyrics from one of those songs, and we were talking about how she used to like to drive around Kate's Cove. And after the service was over, Rebecca, her daughter, pulled me aside down close, and she had just these huge tears pouring down her face, and she goes, I heard my mom singing those words in the back seat of the car with the windows down as we went around Cades Cove Loop, and just singing to God. It was so amazing, what she was singing, those mountains and all those beautiful animals and the streams running by, that she was just blown away by how good God is and how much He blesses us. And so Ruth was doing the same thing in a very bad situation. She was, having to pick up trash to have something to eat, all the rotten things that were being left behind. And yet she was willing to do that for her mother-in-law. And in this moment, this new era, this new season, didn't seem like things were going too well. And yet in that moment, Boaz sees her and asks who she is, finds out. And then over the course of this very short period of time, she becomes engaged and married to Boaz, and they have a child. And Naomi says, my life has been turned upside down in an amazing way. In the beginning, she said, call me Mara, because it means bitter. And then after this, she's just amazed and gleamed. Her face, that smile is just there because now she's got a grandchild, and that new season has opened up. And I think about, kind of when, what life is like for most people who don't know Jesus. And it is every day there's chaos that just goes around and around all the time. That there's just this pain and suffering. There's just never being satisfied. People are always, talking about you, lying, cheating. You got addictions that are just overwhelming you, whether it's alcohol or drugs, all those kind of things. And then when you finally turn all that over to Jesus, what's that new era like? What's that new season like? And for the disciples, it changed everything. Can you imagine what their lives would have been like without Jesus? And yet when Jesus was there with them for those 3 short years, that was a season, right? They were training, they were learning, they were growing. And then he left and went to heaven. And can you imagine the shaking knees in that room the next day when they all were supposed to go do his will? When they're all supposed to figure out, what am I supposed to do now that Jesus is gone? And in that moment, God said, hey, you've been training, you have my word, you have the Holy Spirit. Go and do likewise. Go and be like Jesus. Shine the light into the world. Bring the song to the people who are sad, just in a place where they just want to kill themselves. Carry the light of Jesus, the love of Jesus to them. And for us, we live in such a broken world, and I hear it from church members all the time. I hear people say, man, it's just gotten so bad, it's gotten so bad. And, that's the way final exams are in college. You're like, oh man, this is awful. This is just terrible. All this, how can they make us, how can they want us to know all this information? How can they want us to read all these books? They've only this short period of time. How on earth can we get through this? And then when you do, and you finish, I don't care if you made D's and C's. You're like, woo, it's over. This is unbelievable, And you see that, and my wife's had 4 children, and I can remember her and the pain and suffering of labor and just sitting there going, this is unbelievably excruciating. And I mean, just, all of the breathing and the all of it. And then the baby's born. And then it's like you almost forget all of that stuff that you went through, all of those trials and torment and just that agony of giving birth, because now that baby's just there in your arms and it's just smiling at you. And there's a new season that's coming. There's a new era that's starting. And so for us, whatever you're going through, whatever you're facing right now, maybe it is you're just so in your tracks, tired of what you've been doing, that you need to go back to school. Maybe it's that you need to get some counseling for your marriage. You need to sit down and have a discussion or communicate. Maybe it's that you need to pick up the phone and ask for somebody's forgiveness or start walking and getting in shape. Maybe whatever it is that's out there. Maybe it's, hey, I need to pick up the Bible and I need to figure out what it is that God wants me to do in this world. And whatever it is, when you make that decision, it starts a new era, it starts a new season, and it's incredible. And I hope you'll join me in that walk. God bless you. Have a great evening.